All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're talking about one of the simplest, but maybe one of the most powerful tools any gardener has, and that's mulch. It might not sound super glamorous, but trust me, understanding it can completely change your garden for the better.
I mean, who isn't? You know that feeling, right? You pour all this time and energy into your garden. You get it looking just right. And then you turn around a week later and it's just full of weeds again, or the soil is totally parched. Well, if that sounds a little too familiar, you're in the right place because we're going to talk about the solution.
So, what is this magic stuff we're talking about? Let's officially meet the hero of today's story, mulch. At its heart, it's really simple. It's just a protective layer you spread over your soil. I love this analogy. Think of your garden soil as the cake and mulch is the icing. It's that finishing touch that protects everything underneath and, honestly, makes the whole thing work so much better. Now, not all mulch is the same. It kind of falls into two main camps. On one side, you've got your organic, biodegradable stuff, wood chips, leaves, straw. These are the ones that break down over time and actually feed your soil. Then on the other side, you've got inorganic types like gravel or slate. They're great for keeping weeds down and they look really sharp, but they don't do anything to improve the soil itself. We're going to be focusing mostly on those organic superheroes today. So besides just looking nice, what does mulch really do? Well, it has some seriously impressive superpowers that can really transform the health of your garden. It's so much more than just a topping. We're going to break down the four biggest ones. First, how it holds onto water like a sponge. Second, how it stops weeds before they even get started. Third, how it protects your plants from wild temperature swings. And maybe the coolest one of all, how it actually builds incredible living soil from the top down. Okay, let's start with water. A good layer of mulch is like putting a lid on your soil. It stops the sun from just baking it and turning all that precious water into vapor. And the impact here is huge. We're talking up to 70% more water staying in the soil. That means you water way less, which is good for your plants and your water bill. And check this out. This quote perfectly shows that soil-building power we were talking about. This gardener was dealing with that hard-packed clay soil. The kind you could practically make pottery out of. But after just 3 years of using organic mulch, the soil was so rich and crumbly, he could sink a shovel into it with just his hands. That's what feeding the soil does. Mulch also works like insulation. You can think of it as a blanket for your garden bed. In the blazing summer sun, it keeps the soil and the plant roots cooler. And then in the winter, it holds in the warmth, protecting those roots from a hard freeze. This whole process just means way less stress on your plants, so they can focus on growing. So how does that amazing soil transformation actually work? Well, it's all about feeding the little guys in the soil food web. As that organic mulch breaks down, it turns into a slow-release buffet for a whole universe of life under our feet. We're talking microbes, fungi, and of course, earthworms. They're the real MVPs, doing all the work to create that healthy living soil that your plants will absolutely love. Okay, so I think we're all convinced on why we should be mulching. So let's get into the how. To really get all those benefits and, avoid some of the common mistakes, there are just a few simple things to keep in mind.
It's really a simple process. First, just make sure your soil is nice and moist and you've pulled the existing weeds. Then, you're going to apply a good, thick layer. The sweet spot is about 2 to 4 inches. If you go too thin, weeds will just pop right through. Too thick, and you could actually suffocate the soil. After that, it's just a matter of topping it off whenever it starts to look a little thin.
All right, listen up, because this is probably the single most important tip you're going to hear about mulching. Never, ever pile mulch right up against the stems of your plants. We call that a mulch volcano, and it's bad news. It traps moisture right against the bark and can cause rot and disease. What you want is a donut. Just pull the mulch back a few inches from the stem, give your plants some breathing room. So you've probably heard this before, right? This idea that using fresh wood chips can actually hurt your plants by stealing nitrogen from the soil. It's a really common fear, so let's clear the air on this one. So here's the deal. For the most part, this is a myth. Yes, the tiny microbes breaking down the wood do use a little nitrogen, but, and this is a big but, it only happens in that super thin layer right where the wood chips meet the soil. Your plant's roots are way deeper than that. In fact, this can actually be a good thing because it helps stop weed seeds right at the surface. The absolute key here is to always put mulch on top of the soil. Never ever mix it in. All right, so you're ready to start. But what should you use? There are a bunch of options out there, so how do you pick the right mulch for the right job?
This little chart is a great place to start. For things like trees and shrubs, you want something that breaks down slowly, like wood chips, so it lasts a long time. For your vegetable garden, something that breaks down faster, like straw or shredded leaves, is perfect because it adds nutrients to the soil more quickly. And hey, grass clippings are great. They're full of nitrogen. Just make sure you use thin layers so they don't turn into a slimy mat.
And don't forget to think about your terrain. If you're gardening on a slope, you need a mulch that's going to kind of lock together and stay put, like a shredded hardwood. If you use something light and chunky on a hill, you can bet that the first big rain is just going to wash it all downhill. Save those lighter materials for your flat garden beds.
So let's wrap this all up. What do you really need to remember? Mulch saves you time, it saves you money, and it saves you water. Simple as that. It fights your weeds for you and it protects your plants. But most importantly, organic mulch is how you build that amazing living soil. Just remember the golden rules: 2 to 4 inches thick, and always, always make a donut, not a volcano.
And that really brings us to the final thought here. It's so easy to think of mulching as just another chore on the garden to-do list, but it's so much more than that. It's really about being a good steward of the land. You're not just covering up dirt, you are protecting and feeding this incredible living ecosystem. So the real question isn't if you should mulch, but how are you going to protect it?